The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for November the 4th, 2015 is now in session. Before I ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, a few things I want to say. This is an exciting time for our town. At our council meeting on December the 1st, which is the next council meeting we'll have, we'll be formally recognizing the newest members of our town council. I say formally recognizing, officially recognizing them. Gary McDonald, Fred Newberry, and Chris Nason, by swearing them in for their term in office. We will also formally recognize and show our appreciation to the departing members of our council, Jody Hess, David Sanders, and Larry LaHan. Tonight, though, I would ask that you join me in congratulating and welcoming Gary, Fred, and Chris to our council, and in thanking Jody, David, and Larry for their years of service to our town and to the greater community of Dare County. So if you'd please stand and join me in a round of applause, Tim, I would appreciate it. Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, that's sneaky.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can tell Fred we recognized him tonight. Normally, when I ask for a moment of silence, I just leave it up to you to do your own thing in the moment of silence. But tonight, I have something that's been troubling me, and I haven't said much about it. And it's the venom and the anger and the bitterness toward our police officers throughout our country. It's amazing how bad it is and how much abuse they're taking. And there's absolutely no, to my mind, there's no reason for it, but we have people who are pretty famous advocating killing police officers. It's just something I think we need to say at least a silent prayer on their behalf, because there's no reason that any job should be subject to that kind of unwarranted threats and unwarranted abuse, in my mind, my opinion. But please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to amend the agenda under paragraph 4, add an item C for a planning board report. Can I have a motion from someone to do that?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion at all? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll have a planning board report as part of the agenda tonight. I need your approval, a motion to approve the consent agenda, Council.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda has been approved. At this time, I would open general public comment. Anyone who wishes to speak?
No one signed up.
No one signed up. Thank you. I'll close public comment. At this time, I'll ask the finance officer to present our quarterly financial reports. Bonnie?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Town Council. You have before you there the first quarter, July through September, the financials, and they are as expected. For the first quarter of the year, we spent more than what we have taken in, due mainly to the fact that our taxes haven't started rolling in until about, I think we got a little bit this month, but the next few months is when our taxes will really start rolling in, December, January timeframe. But I wanted to have you to look at the expense page, the revenues are pretty straightforward. The main difference in those, it shows as an increase over this same quarter last year. And most of that is due to a timing factor of the taxes. Our ad valorem taxes, we've received more to date than we did last year. And also, the utilities franchise tax, and that's due to the allocation method that has changed, resulting in additional revenues. So you'll see that when we get the audit report from our auditor later on, you'll also see that those revenues for the year last year were up overall as well. And for the expenses, for the administration department, the increase in that department was due to a lightning strike that the town received the first part of July. We had to replace copiers in our code enforcement and police department. Now, we since then have done a budget amendment that you all did last time that recognized the revenue we got from our insurance company to take the, to offset the expense, but that's what the increase is showing in the administration department. The police department overall for this quarter, as compared to last quarter, shows a decrease, and that's mainly in the savings from purchasing the cars instead of leasing them. When we lease them, we have to show it as an expense, and then we also show the debt payment. So we are no longer leasing purchasing our vehicles, we're purchasing them outright. So that's why the police department shows a savings. The sanitation shows a slight increase. That's due to the contractual increase for chipping that we have in that department, as well as a CPI adjustment for our recycling, our curbside recycling. The fire department, last year was the final year for the 800 megahertz radios, so therefore that shows a savings over the same quarter as last year. The Public Works Department, last year, this time, we had put new phone systems in the buildings, and we also had done a bulkhead over at the police department. So we had spent more money this time last year, and it was mainly for those two things. And then lastly, in the Code Enforcement Department, last year we finished up the bike and ped plan, the bike and pedestrian plan, that, of course, we didn't have this year. So that summarizes the first quarter. Does anybody have any questions?
Council?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Town Planner, Wes?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I have a brief report for you tonight for the month of October. There were 8 zoning permits issued, 26 building permits issued, which consisted of 2 new single-family dwellings, 2 remodels, 2 repairs, 1 addition, 3 remodel additions, 3 accessories, and 13 others. There are currently 18 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees collected in October was $9,672.68. With respect to code enforcement, 1 warning citation was mailed, and that was for landscaping debris, right-of-way obstruction. Any questions?
Council?
No.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Chief Cole, our police chief.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Southern Shores Police Department's report for October 2015. Officers handled 917 calls for service. As you can see by the pie chart, some of the breakdowns. 132 of those were extra patrols. They conducted 78 traffic stops, responded to 20 alarms. We had 26 suspicious condition calls, 43 direct traffic. Most of those were at the school. We had 10 mutual aid requests from surrounding police agencies, conducted 105 residence checks, and another 241 business checks. A breakdown of incidents, which were actual crimes that were reported. As you can see, we had a total of 19. Just 2 burglaries, 5 larcenies. We had 2 fraud, 2 were vandalism, and the CSA violations, those were all criminal possession of, 2 of those were actually cocaine, and 2 were heroin arrests reported. We also had 1 assault arrest. We had actually 2 motor vehicle accidents for the month. And officers handed out of those 78 traffic stops, 23 actual written citations and another 38, another 38 warning citations. And we had 3 ordinance violations. 1 was for fireworks, and 1 was parking without a permit, and 1 was parking in the right-of-way. The only other, the only other thing I will tell you is that for the month, several of the officers, including myself, we participated in the annual Fall Festival at the elementary school, and that was a great success, as it always is. And the officers actually enjoyed themselves. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I have 2. One, the suspicious conditions number, is that about stable, or is it up? Or
That's
I can't
it's about average. We average between 18 and 25 each month. And a lot of that is because we encourage people to just call. If you just happen to see a vehicle just kind of cruising through the neighborhood that doesn't look right,
okay.
That's normally what they do, is they call, and that's reported to us as a suspicious condition.
The other one I got, is there any update on our mail issue?
MAIL.
Somebody asked me about it, so I had to ask.
Well, it is the federal government. What I can tell you is that 1 has been federally indicted, and the other one is still pending. But until the one that is still pending is done, I can't release the information. Trust me, I want to get this
Okay.
out and get it over with as quick as you can.
But there has been 1 indictment.
That's correct, yes. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
David. Before I call on our Fire Chief, Ed Limbacher, I'd like to ask Peter Rasco to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. As Chief Limbacher comes up, I just wanted to announce to the council that the Department of Insurance has now recognized the Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department with a Protection Class 3, which is an increase and improvement from Protection Class 5, and that's unprecedented with this department, and as well as many all-volunteer fire departments. It's a great accomplishment. It speaks to Chief Limbacher's leadership and also all his crew. And I've congratulated him, and the Department of Insurance, the Secretary of DOI has sent out a press release, but I thought he deserved something more than just him getting up and giving his own report. So I just wanted to make sure that the council understood how important that was for the community.
Thank you, Peter.
Good evening, everybody. I do have a prepared statement at Peter's request. It's up to you what you'd like me to do first. I could do the report first and then get to the ISO rating, because you might have some questions on that.
Do your report and then give us
Okay.
a statement.
This is the fire department report for October of 2015. And this month we responded to a total of 63 calls, as you can see it on the pie chart, how it's broke down. We had 1 brush fire, which is in connection with some of my stuff I'm going to mention with the ISO rating. We got to a brush fire, and before we even knew it, the police already had somebody and cited them for actually starting the fire, and they had fireworks. So it just goes along to my speech when I get to my ISO rating, but I just thought I'd mention that. So we had 34 EMS calls, 2 motor vehicle accidents, 2 carbon monoxide incidents. And I also feel it's a little bit, I think I should mention this also. I know a lot of people down here may have all-electric, hot water tanks.
Heat pumps.
Yeah, heat pumps,
whatever.
all that. You don't have a lot of, you may have a fireplace, but if you're not using it, they may not feel it's necessary to have a carbon monoxide detector. But I will tell you this, we were at a house on the ocean front this month, and it was over 60 parts per million, which is a couple breaths of that and you're gone. So luckily they had one. There was nothing in the house that was everything was operating properly. It wasn't anything that was improper burning, but what happened was they had a carpet cleaning company come in there, and they left the vehicle running under the structure, and it went in the bottom and filled the residence. I really don't know how the guy didn't have a headache or we didn't find him in there, to be honest with you, but luckily we didn't. So I would just caution everybody, even though you think you don't need it, they're very inexpensive. I would definitely have one in your house. Moving on. We had one overheated motor, one arcing, one assisted a police agency, 10 public services. And the reason why that's so high this month, typically October is Fire Prevention Month. We go to the school, Pleasure Palace, the church, do a bunch of public outreach. We also have the open house, as many of you know. So that's why that number is so high this month. One authorized controlled burning, 3 smoke or odor of smoke, 2 smoke detector due to malfunction, 1 alarm, 1 CO due to malfunction, 1 smoke detector due to malfunction, and 1 alarm system activation due to malfunction, for a total, like I said, of 63. And that's this month's report. Anybody have any questions on the fire report itself for last month?
I don't.
Thank
Okay.
you, Ed. I want to, you have one more thing you want to read, your statement. You're going
I do, if you have
You go
something.
ahead. You go
Okay.
ahead.
I would like to ask, I have 2 of my command staff here, Deputy Chief Carlson and Lieutenant Evans, to step up with me because they're also a part of this. I typically don't like to, I'm not a big look-at-me kind of guy, but when Peter asks me to do something, I tend to think it's important enough to follow through with it. So I did do a prepared statement, once these guys get up here. So as many of you know, the Southern Shores Fire Department went through an ISO ratings inspection back in August. For those not familiar with what it entails, it basically is the equivalent of the IRS coming to your house. It was completed by Tony Bailey. He's an inspector with the North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal. During this process, the inspector scrutinized every aspect of the department. This included equipment, vehicle maintenance, staffing, training, record-keeping, communications, water supply, mutual aid contracts, public outreach, and that's just to name a few of the categories that were covered. The command staff, board of directors, and all the members worked tirelessly and put an endless amount of hours into preparation to achieve the highest possible rating. This was an extremely and difficult, daunting process. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that effective February 1st, 2016, the Southern Shores Fire Department is a Protection Class 3. This is a vast improvement over the 5 that we had been. A Class 3 protection rating is one of the very best possible ratings. In fact, last year, less than 7% of all the communities across the United States were able to achieve this rating of 3 or better. This includes paid fire departments as well as your volunteer departments. The residents of Southern Shores and Martins Point are getting the gold standard of fire protection, in my opinion. I feel it's pretty incredible for a small volunteer department like ours. This is a testament to our membership and the pride that they take in the department. It is a direct reflection on the town of Southern Shores for your support. We all function as a team here when it's an emergency within the town. It is a team effort, and when I say team, I'm including Chief Cole and his officers, the police department, the town manager, town staff, and the Department of Public Works. It is this team, as a result of this relationship, the residents and the visitors of Southern Shores enjoy the highest level of service and professionalism possible when dealing with us in an emergency situation. In closing, I'd just like to say thank you to each one of you for your support of myself and of the entire department. Does anybody have any questions?
No, just thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. You deserve that in your department. At this time, I'd like to call on Councilman Lahan for the Capital Improvement Planning Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On October 15th, 2015, at 2 p.m., the Capital Improvements Planning Committee met. Attending were Tom Bennett, Larry Lahan, Citizen Representative Jim Connor, Elizabeth Morey, and staff members Peter Rasco, David Cole, Joanne Loff, and Rachel Patrick. Chief Cole gave a brief report on the traffic load information that was collected for the summer traffic count. That traffic report is available at Town Hall if anyone wants to have a look at it. Rachel Patrick presented the results of the prioritization efforts for the proposed streets rebuilds for fiscal years 2016, 2017. And Yalpon Trail was a top priority on that list. Osprey Lane was ranked second on the list. Wild Swan was ranked third, as were conditions on Twisted Tree Court, Wax Myrtle, and Clamshell Trail. Other streets listed were ranked below those streets. Elizabeth Morley did not use the ranking system that the rest of us used, but had her own list, listing South Dogwood Trail, Hillcrest Drive, Sea Oats Drive, Wax Myrtle Trail, including Dolphin and Porpoise Run. Larry LaHan recommended 2 streets be added to the priority list, that being Spindrift Trail, High Dune Loop, Wild Pony Lane intersection, and Clamshell Trail, Chickahawk Trail intersections. Rachel suggested that Pintail Trail be added to the list to be monitored, that it was beginning to show root upheaval and asphalt failure. Following the discussion, the committee members, Bennett and LaHan, recommended to add the following streets to the prioritization list. That would be Hillcrest Drive, Sea Oats Trail, Wax Myrtle Trail, including Dolphin and Porpoise Run, Spindrift Trail, High Dune Loop, Wild Pony Lane intersection, Clamshell Trail and Chickahawk Trail intersection, Wax Myrtle and Hickory intersections, and Pintail Trail. The ranked prioritization of streets will continue to be discussed at the next and future committee meetings. Patrick reported to the committee that 2 residents have requested a multi-use path or a bike path from Skyline Road cul-de-sac to the Town Hall parking lot to provide a connection to the multi-use path on 198. And after some discussion, it was suggested that Public Works create a path behind the Pit Center on the north side, since that would provide a direct connection to Skyline Road to the Pit Center parking area. With no other business to consider, the meeting was adjourned. That's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Larry. Leo Holland, Finance Committee report and recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee met October 29th at 2 p.m. here in the Town Hall Conference Center. The meeting was called to order by Mayor Bennett. Committee members were, of course, Mayor Bennett, myself, and attending staff were the town manager, the finance officer, and the public works director. Finance officer went over the quarterly financial reports that you just had seen and reviewed those. The other part she discussed was the fiscal year 14-15 year audit. It has been completed. It has been submitted to the Local Government Commission for review, but there hasn't been any comments at this point returned from them. And of course, we'll hear from our auditor later on that. The majority of that meeting was spent reviewing the available funds remaining for anticipated 15-16 street improvements. And the Public Works Director did report we have 3 projects already under contract and are underway, and that's Bear Track Lane, Hollow Beach Court, and a section of North Dogwood. And all of those came in within our engineering budget limits. But one of the things is doing those 2, there's 2 other streets that need to have attention. That's going to be our Fox Grape and the lower end, I guess the north end of Beech Tree. By taking those 2 projects on in the fiscal year 15-16, there's going to be about bids and involved that we feel it's coming in. We're going to would need to do or spend another $135,000 to do those 2 streets. Now, the Public Works Director, Town Manager, Finance Officer offered a couple alternatives for those projects. One is to take some budget from various parts of the budget of the Public Works. But after discussion, it was kind of decided that that was not, we didn't think that was the proper way to go. Another alternative was phasing of Fox Grape. But our experience been on phasing, and we got an example of it at Beech Tree, it gets pretty if you can phase it, but it does get expensive for the project when it's finally finished, which could be done over 2 or 3 budget periods. So the Finance Committee members decided that the residents of both those streets have waited long enough. They want their streets repaired. I've been to Fox Scrape. If I was a resident over there, I'd been jumping up and down long before now. And they're expecting an improvement in that area this year. So what the Finance Committee is going to be recommending to council tonight is that the additional $135,000 necessary to complete both of these anticipated street improvements during the current fiscal year be transferred from the town's undesignated fund balance into the Public Works Department streets, bridges, and canals for 2015-2016 street projects line. And that'll be supplementing the original appropriation of $516,000. So the recommendation is to full council is for an approval for that transfer of funds so we can complete those 2 streets.
I need a motion from council, somebody from council to approve that transfer of funds.
I move we approve budget amendment number 3. It was in our book.
Yes. Thank you, Jody. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, David. Any discussion?
Nope. We've had our discussion.
Better discussion? At the committee level, we sure have.
Well, if you want some reasons why I passed the motion was that I've always said that the amount of money, the 516, 514, whatever that number is, it's put in there for roads, has been set because of the 3 cents that we committed some years ago. But it also said that if we have roads that really need to be done, we could increase it up to the point that as long as the staff can handle the projects. And I see this one as being in roughly $135,000, makes sense to transfer it and get the job finished for those citizens.
I'm inclined to agree with that. One thing I would add, we talked about taking some monies from the bulkhead fund, which is areas like Yopon, which has a serious bulkhead problem from primarily from age, but partly from trees growing too close to the bulkhead itself. And that's going to be a significant amount of money to be spent on that bulkhead before you even talk about doing anything with the street. So I would agree with what Jody said, to use the money from the general fund and undesignated fund balance, I'm sorry, and get these two streets finished up. David, anything?
No, I just feel that we should fix these streets completely from one end to the other when they're needed.
Thank you.
To do anything else just creates other problems and can increase the expense.
Any further discussion? All in favor of accepting a committee recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion's made and carried. Thank you. Sam Williams with our Planning Board report. Good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just have a short report this evening. Just a follow-up from the last time I reported to you last month on the ZTA, Zoning Text Amendment 15-02, entitled Setback Preservation Requirements. The purpose of this ZTA was to preserve and protect trees by minimizing removal of existing vegetation inside and rear yard setback areas. And it all goes back to the issue of clear cutting. At the last council meeting, the Planning Board recommended the council direct the Planning Board to revise and continue working on the proposed ZTA. Town Council approved the Planning Board recommendation, and so at our last meeting, the discussion was entirely on the ZTA. If you remember, the ZTA has 2 major sections. One deals with undeveloped lots, and the other deals with lots that are scheduled to be built on or proposed major renovations. And the focus of the discussion at our last meeting was on the undeveloped lot section. There was a number of issues, concerns, possible changes. wordsmithing, so on, that were discussed. After about 2 hours of discussion, a motion was made and approved to send the proposed ZTA back to the applicant, which is SSCA, for revision, and if SSCA wanted to resubmit. So because it was sent back to SSCA, the recommendation for the planning board on ZTA 15-02 is to disapprove the ZTA in its current form. Are there any questions?
Am I to interpret that they withdrew their application?
No, I don't know whether they'll withdraw their application or not, but the application as submitted was sent back to SSCA for their revision and resubmittal, or to just pull the application and not resubmit it.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, any further comment? Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd call on Teresa Osborne with Dahlia and Osborne, our accounting firm, to give us her an annual report. Thank you, Teresa.
Good evening,
Good
Mayor and
evening.
council members. I am here with you tonight to present the results of your June 30th, 2015 audited financial statements for the town of Southern Shores. The town has received an unqualified opinion on its financial statements, which is the best opinion you can receive, and this is outlined on pages 1 and 2 of the financial statements. This confirms that your financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Additionally, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control, and this is outlined in the internal control report on pages 57 and 58 of the financial statements. I'm not going to go through the entire, I think it's about 60 pages tonight, because we would be here all night long. What I have done is gone through the report, and I've picked out some highlights to go over with you this evening. Just as a reminder, Exhibits 1 and 2 on pages 11 to 13 are what we refer to as government-wide financial statements, and they include all of the fixed assets and debt of the town. Additionally, this year, a new accounting standard was adopted, which required local governments to recognize their proportionate share of the statewide pension plan, which was fortunately well-funded at June 30th, 2015, meaning the town picked up its share of that net asset. These statements most closely resemble business accounting. However, the fund level statements that I am going to discuss this evening in detail provide the information used more routinely by local governments. So we're going to skip over Exhibits 1 and 2, but if you have any questions when you look over those, if you look at those from year to year, you're going to see some differences in those statements because of the changes in the pension accounting, and I'll be glad to answer those questions if you want to just give me a buzz. I would like to draw your attention tonight to pages 14 and 15. Page 14 is the balance sheet for all of your governmental funds. Page 15 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for all of your governmental funds. And you have 3 governmental funds. You have your general fund, you have a canal capital project fund, and you have what's in a column that says total non-major fund, that's your cemetery fund. Just FYI, the canal project is finished. These statements reflect a balance of $68,487 in that fund. That's actually going to get closed out with a budget amendment this year. Those were leftover loan proceeds that were not spent, but because the loan on the canal project was paid off last year, those funds are unrestricted and it will just be transferred back to the general fund. So I'd like to start on page 15, and if you'll look in the first column, which is your general fund, you're going to see that expenses exceeded revenues by $1,109,301, $1,109,301, but don't panic. This was because the town budgeted to pay off all of its existing debt for the canal dredging project and some finance police vehicles that totaled $1,546,280. The decision was made to do this because the town had sufficient available fund balance, and it paid off the debt with a higher interest rate than what the town was earning at the time on its in idle funds, and honestly, more than you're probably going to earn on your idle funds for years to come. So that's the $1,109,301 that you see towards the bottom of the first column on that page. On page 14 over in the first column, which is again the general fund, you're going to see that the town ended the year with an undesignated fund balance of $3,366,840. Does everybody see that over in the first column in the fund balance section? That amount represents 48.5% of your fiscal year 15 expenses, or almost 6 months of operating expenses. Additionally, this amount is over the town's minimum fund balance policy, which requires you to have a minimum of $1,750,000. Any questions on any of that? So while you did have a reduction in your fund balance, you still have a very healthy fund balance. And you were, again, paid off some higher interest debt, which I feel was a good move. Several revenues increased over the prior year, including sales tax and land transfer tax, as well as utilities franchise, which changed its distribution method. Overall, the county had a 21% increase in land transfer tax collections, and so the town benefited from some of that increase. Not to the 21% extent, but did recognize some increases there. There was a reduction in occupancy tax as a result of the town's tax levy in proportion to other towns that increased tax rates in the prior year. And as you recall, that's because those shared revenues are distributed based on your tax levy in proportion to everybody else's tax levy. And you had some towns in Dare County that actually increased their tax rates in the prior year, and your tax rate remained the same, so the proportionate percentages changed. There were savings and expenses in most departments, and where you can see this starts with the detailed funds on page 47. I'm sorry, yeah, 46. This is a detailed revenues and expenditures report for the general fund. Those first two pages are your revenues, but if I could get you to turn over to page 48, I just want to show you where your savings in your departments were. First of all, under general government in your administration department on page 48, you can see that you had a savings of $15,875, and I'm looking at the bottom of the departments. Over onto the next page in your planning department, you had savings of $19,580. In your police department, you had savings of $92,271, and that was primarily because of some different vacant positions throughout the year. In your public works department, you had savings of $21,569. And then under streets, bridges, and canals, you had savings of $382,728. I just want to point out to you that the major part of what appears to be a lot of savings in that department is a result of the timing of the project for the Tall Pine Bridge project. The savings in that expense category is also offset in your revenue because it's partially grant funded, so you know, there's not as much savings as what it looks like, and that, of course, that project is continuing. Under environmental protection, over on page 51, you had savings of $18,248 in your solid waste department. There are a number of other statements that are included in this report. However, the two or three that I've gone over tonight, I feel provide you with the best synopsis of your financial position at year end. The remaining statements and notes provide more detailed information on these summarized statements. Do you all have any questions for me this evening?
Yeah, I have a couple. As our auditor, have you seen anything that might indicate there were any expenditures or obligations made during the fiscal year that were unauthorized by the council?
I did not. Just to give you a little bit of a brief background on what an audit includes. An audit involves assessing internal control risk at the beginning of the audit. So when I come in, I actually do interviewing of employees and ask a lot of questions about what kind of policies and procedures and processes are in place. And once I do my initial internal control risk, that's how I develop my audit plan and determine what I'm going to look at while I'm here. Obviously, I do not look at 100% of the transactions, or you all would have me on retainer all year long. But I pick the transactions that I look at based on the risk that I think there is. And I can tell you that after my risk assessment and the review of the transactions that I selected, that I didn't come upon anything that, you need to be made aware of. If I had, that would have been disclosed in the internal control report, which is the report on pages 57 and 58 of the report.
If you would have found that, would that have been a qualified?
I'm sorry?
If you would have observed any of that type of activity, would that have appeared also in, we would have had a qualified instead of unqualified?
You wouldn't necessarily have had a qualified opinion, but it definitely would have been disclosed in the internal, we would be required to disclose something material in the internal control report.
Okay, so then all our expenditures, including those for street projects, were made within our budget as you...
They were made within your budget, yes.
Okay, and then I think I read this all properly. The audit reflects that the town's now debt-free.
You are debt-free. You are going to, on Exhibit 1, you're going to see some long-term liabilities in there, but those are related to pension obligations and post-retirement benefit obligations. They don't have anything to do with any debt. And I can just point that out to you on page, give me just a moment. On page 38, in the notes to the financial statements. You can see that top line is compensated absences. That's vacation accruals at the end of the year. So there is a balance in there because you did have some vacation accruals unpaid at the end of the year. And that's just, you're always going to have some of that. But you can see on the line underneath that where it says installment agreements, that's where all of your loans were paid off. That line reflects the canal debt. It also reflects the debt on the police vehicles. And then you can see the only other thing included in debt is your OPEB obligation, which is what I referred to as the other post-employment benefit. That's for retiree health insurance. So those two amounts totaling $213,518, you'll actually see that on Exhibit 1 on your balance sheet as debt, but it's not debt related to loans or lease purchase agreements.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I don't have any. Thank you very much for answering mine.
You're welcome. You always put me to the test when I'm here.
Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate your time.
I'd just like to say that overall, I think the town ended the year in strong financial condition. And as always, it's kind of hard to think about your questions, when I'm here in front of you. But please feel free to call me if anything comes up. Ask Bonnie, and she'll give me a call, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Under new business item B, Council, we have a reclassification of a public works position, organizational chart revision. Are there any questions about that? If not, I'd like to go ahead and ask for a motion to approve that organizational chart revision.
What we're doing there is adding a public works senior maintenance technicians, a little bit of the reporting process.
We're actually changing the terminology.
Yes.
More than anything else. Is that not correct, Rachel?
That's correct. I just want to make sure everybody was aware of what we're doing.
What we're doing there, I'll just make sure everybody knows what we're doing. In the past, we've had a public works director, a public works senior maintenance technician, and two public works technicians.
No, that's current.
That's current.
I'm sorry, that's
The
the
other one's
current,
passed.
right,
Pass.
The next one's a pass.
right. In the past, we had a public works director, a supervisor, and two public works technicians. We're simply changing the terminology, the name of that particular job description to public works senior maintenance technician and a public works technician, not a senior.
Well, correct me, the reporting is a little different too, isn't it? Where before, in the old one, the technicians reported to the public works supervisor, and then the public works supervisor reported to the director.
Right.
Now the,
Right, all three will now report to Rachel Wagner. That's
Right.
correct. It's the same amount of employees in the department, it's just, the reporting is different. So the three will report to Rachel instead of the two guys reporting to a supervisor that reports to Rachel. That's correct.
Makes sense.
I understood this the first time we talked about it. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
no,
Council, I need a motion to approve that change.
so moved.
Second,
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, for some reason, that item on the agenda did not get transposed on the screen. It's on the printed version, but for some reason, I'm not sure why it's not up
The
there.
reclassification?
yeah. it's
Item
not
B,
on that agenda.
6B, but it is on the printed version that was noticed. Do not know why it's not in the
No.
screen.
Item B under new,
It's item B under 6, and that's, we
Under
just
new
discussed it and
business.
passed it. I'll be glad to explain to anybody else after the meeting if they'd like for me to. This time I'll call on the town manager for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on my report tonight is to report to you about the upcoming Tall Pine Bridge construction. The Public Works Director is here tonight, and I thought it would be better to defer to her so you could get it straight from her tonight as to what the plan is for the November 16th start date, and also, more importantly, the signage for traffic reroutes, et cetera.
Good evening, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
As you know, a contract has been awarded to Keystone Contracting for the Tall Pine Bridge project. The contractor will be mobilizing to the site November 16th and will officially close the bridge that day. They'll be placing DOT standard signs and barricades on Highway 12, 158, and South and East Dogwood trails. And the DOT will be placing digital signs on 12 and 158 to help get the message out to drivers. So the bridge is scheduled to reopen in May of 2016. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Did I see where maybe Chief Limbacher can, I think we relocated an engine or something to be able to cover the other side of the bridge if necessary? Did we relocate an engine somewhere to?
No, we placed an additional company document on our responses on that side.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
The fire department, police, school system, trash, recycling, all of those folks, post office, have all been notified as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
I think we all understand that this is going to be a bit of inconvenience to all of us for the 6 months it's going on. It's just one of those things. It's a situation we've had reports for the last, I think, 5 years that the bridge was structurally deficient. Council, in their discussing this and looking at the situation, felt it wasn't worth the risk of having a school bus or some other vehicle go off through that bridge because of the condition of the support timbers. That's why we were moving ahead with it, and the fact that we were able to acquire a grant to allow that work to happen was also a positive for us, for our consideration. Peter, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The second item on my report to you tonight, I wanted to report to council on the seasonal traffic backup countermeasures group meeting that was held on October 13th. This is the second meeting. As you recall, the first meeting was in April, a planning anticipation of the traffic. And this meeting was held at the request of officials from each of the jurisdictions to try and pick out what worked, what might have not worked, et cetera, this summer. And of course, officials from North Carolina Department of Transportation, the town of Duck, the town of Southern Shores, town of Kitty Hawk, and also Currituck County were in attendance to discuss the efforts from the summer. Basically, what happened was we went down the list of things that were tried. The very first one, of course, was the Kitty Hawk-led initiative, Kitty Hawk PD-led initiative to place law enforcement officers in the intersection in front of the main intersection here in front of our town hall, but the US 158 NC 12 intersection. And basically, Chief Johnson reported to the group on that effort. The comment was that it did work. However, they did have to bring in a second officer on most Saturdays because of the volume of the traffic. Chief Johnson did recommend that the North Carolina Department of Transportation signs that state do not block the intersection be installed that are larger than the ones there next year and set further back from the intersection if possible for better visibility. That effort will be picked up again next summer. Also, there was discussion on the Department of Transportation's no right turn on red signs. The comment from those in attendance were basically traffic ignored the signs. So the tickets were not written, but basically during those times, there were people who just basically ignored it and went on through the light. There was a lane assignment signage that was placed by DOT west of the Wright Memorial Bridge. There was discussion about that. Those seemed to have a positive effect on dividing the two lanes. The lanes for each traffic, either a southbound or northbound. There was also discussion about the traffic signal system, and of course that's always a popular item. We get a lot of complaint calls about the timing of the system here at Town Hall, and it was explained by DOT again that the timing and operation are reviewed throughout the summer. It was noted that, of course, when the traffic comes to a halt due to the volume, the system is not effective, obviously. DOT also produced results of traffic counts coming across the bridge and going back across the bridge, and those were discussed as well, and we have those on the website tab for this item on the town's website page in case anybody's interested in those. Also discussed were the traffic cameras. They were working throughout the summer. DOT could not ascertain whether or not the cameras actually had any effect on traffic reduction at peak times. There was also travel times on message boards that were placed by DOT in Currituck. They were implemented throughout the summer, and still there was no data on whether they actually had a qualified effect on traffic reduction at peak times as well. There was a portable message board announcing alternate traffic routes. That was activated by DOT at peak travel times, and that was placed north of Sligo on facing southbound 168. There was no indication of effect on traffic reduction during peak times because of that as well. I will comment that DOT was getting some traffic counts on 64 and sending them to us. I have not received those yet. And also the cameras there at the Alligator River Bridge did reflect that there was increased traffic on that route for the summer. So those are just basic indications that there may have been some positive effect from those efforts to veer traffic out of Currituck west and then around the Sound. There was a lot of discussion about the marketing efforts that were made by the individual jurisdictions, as well as the Outer Banks Association of Realtors, and as well as the Outer Banks Visitors Bureau in advertising alternate routes. Also, the Summer Saver route was advertised in packets by the property management companies. We did have some verbal comments back at the end of the summer. Kitty Hawk and Southern Shores and Duck, the townships did, that those were working, that people were using those. I still don't have any quantification about traffic coming on 64 and heading south from there yet. Also part of the meeting was a discussion led by our Highway Commissioner Malcolm Fearing about the Mid-Currituck Bridge efforts. Commissioner Fearing is confident that the bridge will be built, and he did urge public and grassroots involvement in keeping public pressure on about the project. I think, Mayor, you may have some more comment on that yourself, but that's basically what my report was from Commissioner Fearing. One last item that Southern Shores brought up at the meeting was a reclarification by DOT and by Kitty Hawk about the talk of a left turn sign at the intersection of South Dogwood Trail and eastbound 168. Again, DOT explained their position that that would affect every single resident or piece of traffic coming onto South Dogwood Trail, school, emergency, et cetera. And for their reasoning, it was not practical. I will say that Kitty Hawk chimed in and said they would not support any type of sign such as that in their jurisdiction at the intersection for various reasons. One was traffic backup, and one was they did not have the manpower to place 2 police in that intersection for enforcement. The group adjourned, but this group will meet again in the late winter to anticipate summer season next year. And that's the report on the alternate traffic meeting, and I'll be glad to answer questions on that. I have other parts of my report, Mr. Mayor, but.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Do need to report that the construction bids for, the informal bids for Beech Tree Trail and Fox Grape Lane, at this time, as you talked, the committee talked about that earlier, and the bids that came in, lowest qualified bid for Beech Tree Trail was Barnhill Construction at $138,235. RPC was $139,700, and our engineering cost estimates were approximately $142,000. The Fox Grape Lane project, the informal bids came in. Barnhill was at $193,276, and RPC was $207,500. Engineering cost estimates in that for that particular improvement was $203,000. So those two will be consolidated in a single contract and executed with Barnhill in accordance with your budget ordinance, and also as you amended it tonight. The next item on my report is just to remind everyone that the annual Veterans Day ceremony will be held next Wednesday, November the 11th. It is a jointly sponsored by the town and by the 4th degree of the Knights of Columbus. The speaker at this year's event, which is at 11 o'clock here at the Veterans Garden in Town Flagpole, the speaker will be Matt Costa of Kildover Hills. Matt is a Marine Corps veteran of Desert Storm. He is also the founder of Outer Banks Boot Camps and a gym owner here in Kitty Hawk. He's a local sporting events coordinator. So we look forward to having Matt as our speaker that day. Also, 2 other upcoming sporting events in Southern Shores for the upcoming holidays. The first is the OBX Go Far Turkey Trot 5K that will be held on Thanksgiving morning. This will be, as you know, this is an annual event, and it starts here at Town Hall. Also, on Saturday, December 19th, is the 3rd annual Festivus Road Race, 10K and 5K for Southern Shores, and it's starting at 7:45 a.m. at the marketplace. Mr. Mayor, that's my report. I'll be glad to try to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Ben, do you have anything for us?
No, sir, I don't have anything to report tonight.
Thank you. Just to follow up a little bit on what Peter said about the traffic issue, we had a really good meeting. I thought it was very beneficial to us to hear what the state had to say about not just what they had done to help us with the traffic problems, but what Malcolm Fearing had to say about the Currituck Bridge, which I think most of us in this room would probably agree that's going to be the ultimate chance for a workable solution, is to really get the bridge built. We're seeing more and more of the traffic, while the traffic volumes coming across the bridge seem to be about the same, our traffic volumes going north seem to be increasing because Currituck is drawing with their bigger homes and more cars, is drawing the bulk of that traffic. It's not all going to Duck, and certainly not all going to Southern Shores. I guess the most encouraging thing that Mr. Fearing had to say was that he really felt the bridge, as Peter said, was going to be built. He kept prodding the NCDOT people to commit to 2017 as a start date. Of course, they had not agreed to that earlier. They talked about 2019 as being the real start time for it. And as Peter said, I'd reemphasize just to make sure you understand where he's coming from with that. He really felt that a grassroots effort was going to be just as important as what the politicians could do. In other words, the mayors and boards of commissioners and people like that, with the pressure we put on is okay, but it's not going to have the same effect as if the citizens of Southern Shores and Kitty Hawk and Duck get behind it and let the state politicians know and people who control the dollars, what we like to see. I have nothing else tonight. I'll call on Mrs. Hess?
I don't really have too much, other than I'd like to say thanks to all the citizens of the town for showing up for voting. We had a remarkable turnout, and I just think it was wonderful, because that's really what we wanted to see. So thanks to all of you for coming out. That's it.
David?
Reflecting Jody's words there, also, just want to let the 395 people that did vote for me know that I am deeply honored by the confidence that they had in me, and I really appreciate that support. Obviously, it wasn't quite enough, but that's the way it goes.
Larry?
A couple of things. One is I attended ARPO, which is the Albemarle Rural Planning Organization meeting a couple of weeks ago in Manteo. It was the most contentious and longest meeting that I've ever attended in my 4 years on council. And it revolved around the issue of ferry tolls for the Hatteras to Ocracoke ferry. It looks like currently it's, I won't say a foregone conclusion, that it's very likely in the next few years we're going to see that ferry system tolled. And the reason for that is the system that the state uses to allocate funds, the transportation funds down through the region and down through the local area, states that we're going to have to be responsible at the local level for replacing the ferries. And those ferries cost upwards of $15 million each, and the current ones that we're using are about 50 years old. So since we're going to have to be responsible and under the current system for replacing the ferries, there's just no escaping it. If we're going to have the ferry system, we can't afford to have it come out of all of the local budgets for their road projects. Something is going to have to be done to supplement that, and it's already been recommended that the state approve tolling those ferries. Now, it's not a done deal as I sit here, but you can look for that to be a hot issue in the next few months and then the next years as to that comes to maturity. The only way to avoid that is as the state legislature would have to come up with supplemental funds or some funds in the transportation system to offset those ferry costs. Otherwise, as a matter of fact, the county commissioners has already approved a resolution in favor of supporting putting tolls on the ferry. So that's where we stand today on the ferrying situation from Hatteras to Ocracoke. And I want to join with Jody and Dave in thanking everyone for your support over the past 4 years. It's been a pleasure and a privilege working with you, and I look forward to other kinds of service that we can do here in the community. And thank you all very much.
Thank you, Larry. Leo?
I personally want to congratulate Fred, Chris. I don't see Gary here for your election last night and coming to the town council at the next meeting. The campaign's over. Now you got to focus on governing, and you will learn there are two different approaches. And I do suggest to you that between now and the next meeting that each of you would schedule a meeting with the town manager, the town staff, because you need to learn what those various groups do within, what they do to support the council, what they do to support the town. And you're going to find that in there you're going to have your code of ethics you're going to have to sign. There's a emergency management training along with sitting down with the finance officer, learning where some of the numbers are, where they go and how they get there, and some of the things that the state legislature or the statutes control us under. And I don't know when it's scheduled, but either in late January or February, you'll have 2 days of the School of Government in Chapel Hill. And that is, and probably when you get through with it, after you've completed, you'll probably say, I wish I should have gone to that before I became a candidate. Because you'll find out what you can and can't do as much as we think we can. Then I want to thank David, Jody, and Larry for their service, not only to the council, but to the town, and hopefully we'll see you in some other capacity to help us out. Larry and Jody and I have served on SSCA together at various times. Of course, Chris and I were on the CPOA, so I don't know if you're going to continue there or not. But anyhow, that's my report, and I'm looking forward to looking with a new group, because we got to get the town moving forward, and we need to do it as a group, not as a splinter group. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. I would echo what Leo said in my comments about my working with Jody and David and Larry. I was very fortunate to be elected when I was in the first place, and I was very fortunate to come into an environment that I came into. Very supportive, very positive, very helpful people that really kind of guided me in many ways through the last 2 years, and I can't thank them enough, and they know that. If there's no further business, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.